the Book Mavens. I'm Rachel, this is Amanda, and today we're going to be covering Mansfield Park. Our thoughts, our feelings, whether or not we've changed it in terms of how we ranked it. We had it in different spots, so just follow along with us as we break it down.
Comparison. Okay, first line.
All right. About 30 years ago, Miss Maria Ward of Huntington, with only 7,000 pounds, had the good luck to captivate Sir Thomas Bertram of Mansfield Park in the county of Northampton, and to be thereby raised to the rank of a baronet's lady with all the comforts and consequences of a handsome house and large income. So once again, hitting the mercenary ladies.
What a page turner.
Landing in a good spot and what she do absolutely nothing but play with her dog, which is pretty much what she does. True?
I used to think that sounded like a great life, and let me just tell you, after reading this book,
it's boring. I mean, if you don't have, I mean, I guess you had access to books. You walked a lot. Everybody walks.
Yeah, everybody walks. They go take the air.
Like they all must have had legs of steel.
I'm saying. Mansfield Park. I slogged through this. I finished this 10 minutes ago before we started filming because it's just really boring. It's really boring. Okay, so it centers around the character of Fanny Price, who is the poor relation of the Bertrams. Bertrams? Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's the poor relation of the Bertrams, and they decide in an act of charity when she's 9 or 10 to take in one of the poor Price children, her sister's children, mm-hmm. and Fanny is sent to live with them. And
it's kind of a sickly child, is how she's written.
She's written as kind of sickly, not very, doesn't make a big impression. And I get that. She's a 10-year-old sent to a new place, never been before. You know, a lot of it is about the adjustment and then eventually how her role in the family changes and she becomes invaluable. Like, she goes through kind of phases. He's coming for you.
I see you.
She goes through phases, but eventually, by the time, the bulk of the book happens, she's about 18. She's become really invaluable to the family in terms of as a companion. Yep. There's one of my favorite companion. She's become invaluable to the family as a companion. She is in love with her cousin Edmund. And in the just natural circumstances of their life, the Crawfords siblings come into play. There's Henry Crawford and there's Mary Crawford, a brother and sister who are staying at the local parsonage with relations of theirs. Mm-hmm. And they kind of are similar in age to Edmund and the sisters, Maria and Julia, and then, of course, Fanny. And then the brother Tom is kind of in and out of the scene. He's a little bit older, but mm-hmm. Tom is around as well. And so it's kind of just their interactions with each other and then the general...
In this house,
together. In Mansfield Park, young people all together, and that's kind of it. That's the whole story. It's not until right at the end that there's actually any substantive drama, because a big chunk of the book is about, should we put on this play? Should we not put on this play? And then they don't put on the play. Spoiler.
Yeah. Was it Sir Thomas?
Sir Thomas comes home on the day of their rehearsal. Sir Thomas comes home from Antigua, and he's like, I don't like this. We're not doing it. Mm-mm. Fine. And then to Maria's marriage to Mr. Rushworth, and that poor man is just abused throughout the whole book. Bless his heart. He's not the brightest bulb,
but he's a nice man.
But he's nice, and he's genuine, and he's kind, and he certainly does not deserve the way that he is treated, really, by any of them, other than Fanny. Fanny is always very, she tries to go out of her way to be kind and respectful to him, as you should be to people generally. And that's, and then it's just their different little love triangles and love entanglements until you get to the conclusion, and that's where the excitement is.
Well, I mean, the whole play premise is setting it up for Edmund and Mary Crawford to have their flirtation. Mary Crawford sets her sights, right, on Edmund. But his prospects are to become a clergyman, and that's not good enough for Mary Crawford. So there's a lot of drama that ensues with that as well. Very similar with Northanger Abbey with Isabel.
And I say, drama.
Catherine's brother, in terms of just there's no money in those marriages. At least not to the the expectations of these female characters. So yeah, Austen's really big on that. She has a lot of disdain for, I guess, like treasure hunters. And
she does not write very kindly of, in my mind, really any of the women in this book. She does not treat them very kindly. Like, let's just look at the female characters. We'll put Fanny for last. But you got Lady Bertram, who is
a worthless human being.
Right. She's treated as like basically a step above an invalid. Like now I'll be comfortable that you're here. Fanny gets invited to dinner one night. But how will I do without her? And then another time they're at a party and she's like, Sir Thomas, which game would I enjoy more? Girl, pick a game. There's two. Like, and she's like, which one do you think I'll enjoy more? Like, she's written in such a way that she has no true opinions of her own, that she's very helpless and incapable. And I'm like,
it felt very much like an illustration of what women were supposed to be at that point, which most women are not that way. But it's this idea of that they are helpless, that they can't think for themselves. And so that's their only contribution to society, is to sit there and look pretty.
Is to be beautiful.
And that's it. And so she does a good job kind of showing just how vapid a person would be.
And I'll say this, I can't tell if it was intentionally done. Like, is this the ideal that, like, is she making it? Okay. Because people talk about Northanger Abbey sometimes as like this commentary on the, Gothic romances of the time. Or, so like, is this a commentary on this like idealized woman of the time? Or is this just how she sees those kind of women? Because we know that this is not her experience growing up. She grew up more in the country with a father who's a parson. So she's not like growing up in one of these big houses. She would have been an observer. So is that how she really sees them? Or is this a commentary?
I don't know. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of criticisms. Well, not criticisms, but analyses that can be done where if it was a reflection in terms of how people viewed the clergy in a time when there was a big evangelical move happening in England. And also about, what was it that I read? About like the clergy were being judged in terms of being overly wealthy. There was a big connection with the clergy that Jane Austen had regarding the French Revolution. That her brother, her brother married a widow of somebody wealthy from France who witnessed the French Revolution. Her husband was guillotined, and her second husband was Jane Austen's brother. And so apparently that was like a big...
That's dramatic.
Yeah, that made a big impression on Jane.
She does work in a lot of commentary about the church like the conversations that Edmund has with Mary Crawford, that Edmund just has generally about the profession and like.
But I think it's about how the church should be. The church should have. It's about serving the people. It's not about establishing any kind of wealth. So I think that the French Revolution tie-in in her life, just like no, this should be how the clergy operates, because the clergy's featured in every single book she's written. Yeah, in some way.
That's true, and I'm noticing that pattern. Like we talked about in the last episode, I did not know that I knew generally some things about her life, but not a ton. Like I didn't realize that her father had been a clergyman. He was a clergyman, and so that makes a lot more sense to me now that I see those connections. But like, so you've got Lady Bertram, then you got Mrs. Norris, who is like
awful.
She's like she's the evil stepsister.
Well, there is a Cinderella parallel to Fanny Price's story, that she's this put upon woman who never causes any problems, but is such a blank slate. But we'll get to that later. But just her, how much these other characters grew to rely on her, and that she's just this hidden wallflower and secretly pining away. But that's where the Cinderella parallel, I think, runs out for me, because at least Cinderella was proactive in her own life about going and trying to seek an opportunity for herself. Fanny Price doesn't do anything. Yeah. But wait. And wait some more. Yeah. And a little bit more. Does some more waiting.
And then I mean, I guess it pays off for her in the end, but to have such little...
And maybe that's just a reflection of the time for women, just to have such little control of your own life.
I mean,
maybe that's what they did, but I just can't even imagine.
I mean, other
so
than
passive.
saying no to Mr. Crawford,
right,
which she does with lots of tears and a lot of just, although, can I say, I totally feel her on this. She would just avoid him. That was her strategy. Her strategy was just, I will avoid any circumstance or opportunity where he can try to talk to me alone, or his sister can try to talk to me alone, or anybody can try to talk to me about this. Like, her level of let me avoid the situation that makes me uncomfortable, as a fellow avoider, I have a lot of respect for her strategy. A+. She managed it for a good bit. Good job, Fanny.
I have zero patience for things like that, so
I was gonna say that's my MO. So I was like, I see
that.
what you're doing there, Fanny. I support it. But I mean, but honestly, like, whatever, like, her most impassioned confrontation about it is when Sir Thomas, like, when he goes to Sir Thomas and she has to tell Sir Thomas, like, I don't want to. But she doesn't really want to tell him the reasons because then it'll make his daughters look bad and she don't want to do that. And, like,
ooh, those daughters, those Bertram girls.
Those daughters. Whew. What I tell you.
Well, so you get that whole, I feel a little Pride and Prejudice crossover too with the sisters. The level of competition. I feel that with, what is it, Kitty and Lydia.
Oh,
and
yeah. You kind of see that with Julia.
Sisterly competition for male attention.
I agree. That's an excellent point.
She will reuse things.
Well, it's interesting.
I mean, but I feel like that's just what her world would have been. That's just what she saw.
It is interesting. We were reading in the historical intro that Sense and Sensibility comes out, and then she's working on Mansfield Park still when Pride and Prejudice comes out. So 2 stories where we see a lot of parallels. She's working on Mansfield Park at the same time that they are very successful. It also said that Mansfield Park was like, it said it was her most successful book. Yeah, launched in the summer of 1814, Mansfield Park earned more money than any other work published during her lifetime. There was, however, no corresponding degree of fame because it's not great.
Well, I really honestly think that this is a reflection in terms of what womanly characteristics were valued at the time, and to just sit and be passive, a passenger in your own life instead of captain
of your own destiny.
Yeah, it's just very. So maybe that's just what's going on, and I don't know.
Maybe it feels so. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it is so much longer because it is painting a much deeper picture of the inaction of women's lives, and it's like
no pet, man, no pet.
Oof. I mean, Fanny is very she's just very vanilla. Like,
oh yeah.
I'm telling you, it's not till right at the end where stuff starts popping off. Like, there's a point where a letter arrives to Fanny. Fanny is in Portsmouth with her birth family, I guess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She's there with her biological parents, and she's realized she has no real connection with these people because she hasn't been there since she was 10.
Yeah.
And not a lot of communication with them other than her brother.
Mm-hmm. Who she loves
and who loves her.
Yep.
He treats her so well. And then eventually she gets this deeper connection with one of her younger sisters, and that sister goes to live with them at Mansfield and becomes kind of a replacement Fanny. She even uses that word, like replaces Fanny as the companion of Lady Bertram.
But still more opportunities at Mansfield Park.
Right. And she takes a hold of them. Like, the younger sister is very interested in education and reading. Like, she wants to see. She reminds me of Fanny that way. Like, early Fanny is just very curious. Like, she wants to see and read, but from a very quiet, observing standpoint. But, like, there's a point where a letter arrives from Mary, and she's like, whatever you hear, don't believe it. And that's when I'm like, oh, okay. Now I'm interested. I think it's about to start popping off. And I was correct. It did start popping off. And that was, like, thinking, like 3 chapters before the end.
Everything just kind of right at the end.
It does. It really. And for the first time, a narrative voice is introduced, because most of the book is written as if it's like largely from Fanny's perspective. But then right there at the end, there's kind of this like overview narrator voice about what could have happened or like what did happen with the different characters. It did switch styles in there. Like, I mean, in terms of a book, it's well written. Also, Edmund. Can we talk about Edmund?
Sure. Such a limp noodle. I'm
I
sorry.
get it. No, I mean,
it's terrible, but it's just he's not one I would have chosen.
Well, I get why Fanny is in love with him because from the earliest days, he's really the only one who shows her genuine kindness and attention, and he continuously advocates for her. Like, he's the one who gets her a horse that she can ride for exercise. He's the one that is like, no, you can be without her for an evening so that she can go to dinner with us at the Grant's house. Like, you know, I could see why.
It's still such minimal effort, though.
Right.
Like,
she's infatuated with him.
The bare minimum of kindness that this man shows her, and then she's infatuated with him.
Yeah.
For years. Just basic human kindness. It's not, I mean, he doesn't really single her out. He really doesn't show her any kind of real special attention that he would be even remotely romantically interested in her at any point in time until Mary Crawford.
Yeah, till he realizes he's been in love with a fantasy and
this eye-opener thing. Oh, and it's like that whole, it's person who's been there all along.
It's played so
trope.
Much better in the movie than the book. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to go on this one that the movies make a much more compelling portrayal than the book.
Well, because
although they
do
so
stayed,
right,
and it's just not very interesting.
They do take creative liberties. So there's two movies.
Mm-hmm.
One is from 1999, excellently acted. There's one from 2007.
That's
also they both have
overacted, perhaps a little bit.
I made her watch the concluding scene, and it's just the dramatic pause with the music's in between. I was like, I need you to watch this and listen to the music.
I had seen the one from, what was it, 1999?
Yeah.
You said? Yeah, I hadn't seen the newer one. But
they're both very well acted. Like, they have really quality casting. They were thoughtful about it. But and I'll say this, though, they both highlight different things. Like, the 1997 one takes, 1999. The 1999 one takes a lot of creative license with the drama at the end, which does make it more compelling to watch. Like, the discovery of Henry Crawford and Mariah happens at Mansfield, not like they went off together and they heard about it, which is what happens in the book. And like Fanny's the one who discovers them.
Well, there's always, like, the way Austen writes the drama, it often happens away, and you as a reader are getting it kind of like secondhand through a letter or like a narrative that pops in there that you're not really present for a lot of like the big moments. So, which I don't know, it was like some kind of like self-censoring that she does. I don't know.
Maybe.
I mean, because this is if you dig under the layers, there's a lot of sexy stuff happening in this book, but none of it.
Oh yeah, none of it is discussed. It's all. Yeah. It's like between the lines of the lines of
but
other
you know
things.
that's what's happening. You know that's.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of extramarital.
She does tiptoe around it really in a very, what I would say, very classy way.
Yes. But by doing that, it leaches out all of the drama that, you'd be sitting there eating your popcorn, wanting to read because it's somebody else's drama and you want to be transported in a book. And this lacks the transportive qualities that I like in a book.
Yeah. I'm just kind of underwhelmed by all the characters. I spent a lot of it really irritated at the way that she wrote the women because they were just written as these like pathetic, weak creatures. And I'm a strong, independent woman, and I don't like that.
It's just, and it's interesting, like this almost like predatory thing that she does with a lot of the women, like the treasure hunters. It's a lot of disdain for the women at the time, and I would see why that would be frustrating, living that life and having to see it, and probably being encouraged to engage in those kind of behaviors as well. That it would come through in her writing about just how that it would be, but it's so mercenary, but they had no other choice. What else are these women supposed to do? And I guess Austen showed, hey, you can write some books.
Yeah. But
she didn't get a lot of literary success at the time. So
she has very clear categories of female characters.
Yes.
I'd say probably arguably for the male characters as well. It's just a little bit less apparent.
Stereotypes.
Yeah, it's the very...
Or archetypes, I guess we're going with this.
Yeah. There's very clear archetypes for her characters.
I think she secretly loves a good rake, though, because
I mean,
there are rakes in every single book of men who engage in poor behavior. And there's a little twinkle where you're just like, man, I would just love to have, like, I guess one of her characters just, choose the wrong one. Just for fun.
Well, I mean, Mariah did.
Yeah, but she's not a main character. We already know.
Oh, you want the main character to choose the wrong one.
Yeah, they make her as like a weak character, Mariah.
I mean, I think that's some of the other Gothic novels at the time.
Choose the wrong one. Let's see what happens. let's have Marianne really run off with Willoughby, just like once. I just want to see that story play out.
If you know
the bad boy.
If you know a book where that happens, please let it in the comments so that we can make sure that Rachel reads it. I say who doesn't love a rake, kind of jokingly, because I like to read about them, but let's just be clear in real life. Amanda loves the good guys. I love the responsible adults.
Of course, you want the ones that did it. They're going to treat you well and all of those things. But you, I don't know.
When I'm reading, I'm happy to explore the alternatives.
Well, when we get to the other books, there are other, I think, more well-written leading men than Edmund. Edmund
he's
is
just
milquetoast.
kind of...
Darcy... Ooh, Darcy's got some fire. So I love me some Darcy. And Colonel Brandon, tragic backstory. There's some interest with some of the other characters, and you just don't get that. And then even in Emma with, what's his face? I forget. Knightley. There it is. The sparring, the verbal sparring that happens between him and Emma is interesting. You just don't get any of that in Mansfield Park.
Not really from any of the male characters. Tom has never really developed.
There's very little conflict.
Sir Thomas has never really developed. Talk to me about what you were saying. There's a very casual mention of slavery.
Well, Antigua, that's a plantation at the time in which these books were written, it's supposed to be like the late 1790s, or mid 1790s, anyway, somewhere in there, that decade, that, slavery was absolutely still happening, and the wealth of Mansfield Park is coming from this plantation, and it's just this kind of cavalier acceptance of where the wealth is coming from, which is very interesting. Let's see.
There's one
Great Britain abolished slavery in the 1830s, and so history ropes.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Let her get her US history teacher out.
And but that was decades long fight to get rid of slavery, and Jane Austen herself read many an anti-slavery. There were anti-slavery books and magazines, pamphlets, a lot of information. She was very well read on the subject, and she definitely had more of an anti-slavery attitude. So I think it's interesting. This is really the only book of hers that talks about there being this other location where money is coming in, and just very nonchalant, and maybe that's just how people
and very in passing. There's not a lot of dwelling on it. It does mention it's Fanny's very curious and wants to ask him lots of questions, but won't, because she doesn't want to draw attention to herself or make it seem like she's stepping above herself.
It's conflict free.
She does avoid a conflict.
She really does.
She's getting very mixed signal. I will say this about Fanny. Fanny's getting very mixed signals from the family. There's always Mrs. Norris in her ear, putting her down.
Yeah. No, she's pretty awful. She is
your situation here is terrible. And when she's first there, the sisters really love to highlight how boring and uneducated and blah 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 she is. So in the beginning, I really get it. She's a child. She does totally new situation. One person is constantly wishing you about how you can be more grateful and how this can be taken away from you in a minute. That shapes you.
It does. You might even say that her passivity in her life is just a way to protect herself. It's a shield. So she just withdraws inside. And you get that for people in terms of just surviving horrible trauma, because that's pretty traumatic.
Yeah.
But in terms of a book, a novel, it's hard to get that really through the pages,
because I'll
the way that Austen writes is just so incredibly subtle.
Even though Northanger Abbey was kind of silly, Catherine had some gumption. She snuck in there to look in empty trunks and stuff on her own. She had some she had a curiosity. She had some imagination that was more interesting to read. Fanny rings her hands a lot. That's what I'll say. She's a lot of wringing of hands. And
she's just too passive. She's too passive of a character to be the main character and just to have so little to do with this overall story. Just such a passenger all the time.
Yeah.
Just makes for, it's just not I mean, books don't have to be action-packed. I mean, I like a character development, but you don't even see too much character development. So much of everything with Fanny Price is internalized. And so you could understand making a film about this book that they would have to externalize it in some way and add some drama. But a lot of the drama still is happening around her. She's not centralized in anything. And so, I mean, I guess maybe this is more of a reflection in terms of Jane Austen's own life. Maybe she saw more of herself in Fanny Price as being an observer, somebody who wasn't a main character in a lot of the events that she witnessed or was part
That's a good point. And I will say, from a narrative standpoint, it is interesting to center your book and the internal dialogue and stuff that you can see on a character who is not directly involved in the drama. Like, the whole book is about being an observer, really, which is an interesting narrative choice. I mean, it's not necessarily the most interesting narrative choice in this case.
Well, it would have been more interesting had they included the drama. But then you don't get the drama. So
the drama's like at the end. It's like she's like, "Oh, I need to wrap this up," and I was like, "Okay." Woo-hoo.
And it's a long book. I mean, Mansfield Park is. I mean, compared to Northanger Abbey.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time on this play that then didn't even happen.
Right. And Austen was not. Austen was not against play acting. She did a lot of it in her youth too, so it is kind of interesting, like why there was so critical.
Because there was like
it was just maybe like the content of the play, but she would have been familiar with Shakespeare and everything. I mean, some racy stuff.
Yeah, there were some very charming lines in here that from that perspective. One of the very well-known Jane Austen's quotes is, "We have a better guide within ourselves if we would only heed it." That's loosely paraphrased. That's not exact. But like, you see it a lot as a quote from her. That's a line that Fanny says to Mr. She says it to Henry Crawford when he asks her advice about something. She's like, "Oh, no, I can't give you advice." And then says this great line, and you're like, "Oh, wait." And there's a great commentary on Shakespeare just being like, they're talking about reading and how like reading aloud is a really an underrated skill. And there's a great kind of commentary about like how all British people know Shakespeare at some level. It's just like ingrained in their heritage at some level. Like, you know, everybody casually knows them. You may even know their plays really well, but to be able to read them aloud is an underrated skill, blah, blah, blah. True. But I will have to say my favorite Fanny moment was when she clapped back at Edmund a little bit, because when he's like saying like, "I can't believe you didn't take Henry Crawford's offer of marriage, blah, blah, blah." And she's like, she finally gets like, it's like her one little moment where she's like having a little person and is like, "Oh, yes." Because she's like, she has an excellent line about how it took me so by surprise, this just expectation that a woman is just going to suddenly be in love with any man who just suddenly declares themselves. Like, he's not at the similar station as me. He's not paid any attention to me. He spent all of his time on my cousins. And then he just pops up out of nowhere and says, "Hey, I'm in love with you. I want to marry you." And I'm just supposed to be magically, instantly in love with him. And Edmund's like, "Oh, that's a good point." And then that was it. And I was like, "Oh, dang. I thought we were
takes Edmund, "Oh, now I've suddenly realized that it's been you all along, but that's okay."
Yeah.
That's okay. Well, which is also kind of an insta-love situation as well.
Well, she's been in love with Edmund the whole time.
I know. That's what she wants, so it's okay.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. That reasoning, it makes no more sense to me than Henry deciding, "Oh, well, you know, hey, I see something I like, and you've opened my eyes to things." I mean, that to me, that's just as believable as somebody saying, "Oh, I've known you for years, and now I've realized I'm in love with you." It's just as believable.
But like that was her comment about like, I'm just supposed to suddenly, because he tells me he's in love with me, be instantly in love with him. That's not how it works. But like, no, I agree with you though. It's the whole. Well, and Henry Crawford.
He's an actor.
He's an actor. He's very shallow. I mean, like he wants her because she ignores him.
Mm-hmm.
She's the only one he can't have, which is eventually what he says is why he rekindles with Mariah, is because he says, I used to could totally command her smiles and like her happiness when I came into a room, and then like he realizes she's married and doesn't do that for him anymore, so he wants that control again. He wants to be that center of attention, which is why he had attached himself to Fanny Price in the first place. He's like, oh, I'm going to win her over.
But she does that with men all the time. I mean, look at Wickham. Elizabeth rejects him, so he moves on to Lydia, who worships him.
Can't have.
And I mean, even looking at Willoughby with Marianne, does he have this everlasting regret over letting her go and marrying that gray woman? Like, what? She does it a lot. I feel like there's a lot of that.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you're going to talk about?
Just that Fanny Price is just so much. She's just a one-note character. There's just not a lot of. I don't want to say that she lacks depth. I mean, she's somebody who knows her own mind. You can give her credit for that. It's just you just don't see it.
She doesn't assert herself.
Yeah, you just don't see it out loud, and makes for just just not the most exciting or engaging read for me. Austen's other works are definitely better.
More compelling, for
More
sure.
compelling.
So I'm going to say...
Are you going to move it in your ranking?
Official opinion. Oh, yeah, we're going to have to drop this bad boy down. Because, I mean, this is only the second of the 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at least with Northanger Abbey, it was silly. It moved quickly. This one, it just kept going.
and going. And going.
And it just kept going. And I'm just going to have to say... You can just watch the movie on this one. Either version.
I still say to get a full view of Austen, you should always read her words. And this isn't a favorite. This isn't one that I would revisit like I've revisited other ones. It was a one and done for me. I don't really feel the need to ever revisit Mansfield Park, but I'm happy that I read it because I'm one of those people, just like we did with Robin Hobb. Like, I'm one of those people. I would like to read the full set of whatever, especially since she's only really 6 books. You can put Sanderson in there with 7, but that's it. Like,
am I sorry that I had the experience? No.
But if you're someone who
will I repeat
reading, like this wouldn't be a go-to.
Yeah, if you struggle with Austen, just the language of the time or whatever, you can pass.
There are others.
There are others that are more worth your commitment. To get a feel, you can watch the movie on this one,
or not really, because or just avoid it altogether. I don't know.
I mean, it depends. Some of the actors in there are like I'm big fans of.
Oh, well, Johnny Miller is in the one from 1999. He's adorable. All right, and the last line in here, which is long, as all of her lines are.
I mean.
All right. On that event, they were moved to Mansfield and the parsonage there, which, under each of its 2 former owners, Fanny had never been able to approach, but with some painful sensation of restraint or alarm, soon grew as dear to her heart and as thoroughly perfect in her eyes as everything else within the view and patronage of Mansfield Park had long been. Yeah. I mean, to me, no big reveals. Some of her other first and last lines are a little bit more compelling than this one, but it certainly sets up this luxurious lifestyle at Mansfield Park and learning to embrace the parsonage, I guess, there at the end. So, yeah.
Okay.
So we got. So are you gonna move this to the bottom? Would you rank Northanger Abbey above Mansfield Park?
Yeah, this gonna have to move on down. Are you gonna leave it where you left it? You gonna move it on down?
Yeah, Fanny Price, she's just so sanctimonious. Like, she's just kind of irritating. Catherine's just really silly and also irritates me, but a different kind of irritation. If I could put these at the same spot, I would.
You can have a tie. I'll let you have a tie.
They can be.
Hey,
we're making up the bottom.
We're making up the rules for this, Rachel. We can do what we want.
These are the only 2 that I have no desire ever to read again. The rest of them I read again, absolutely, in a heartbeat.
Fair.
So the 2 I wouldn't touch again.
Yeah.
So I mean, except to talk about it like this, there's just no strong urge to revisit.
There you go. If you, in the comments, if you have a retelling or a spin-off version of Mansfield Park that you really like, this one's kind of like Northanger Abbey. I just don't see tons of retellings of this particular story. I've seen some similar stuff, like there's a Louisa May Alcott book called The Inheritance, which has a little bit of this tone, but it's still different enough that like it doesn't quite.
I've not read that one.
It doesn't. Oh, it's interesting. It's kind of the same thing. But anyway, if you know one, please let us know in the comments, because we'd love to look at some of the spin-offs or the retelling tales of these two to see if it improves our opinion of it, or if we like the spin-offs. Just let us know in the comments.
So next week, we're going to be talking about Sense and Sensibility, which is definitely in the top 3 for us. So we're very excited to talk about this one. Probably have a little bit more enthusiasm talking about Sense and Sensibility. It's my number 2. So that works out. So make sure to like and subscribe if you've been enjoying watching our reviews over Jane Austen's Total Works. And we will see you next week.
Bye.